high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, hour number 2. Oscar Baca, the engineer across the way. Thanks so much for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's of leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. Hey, great Uncle Nat, tell me a story. One about green and gray, one about legacy, and one before lights out. Nat Holman is most well known for being a professional basketball player, but he also founded the camp known as Scatico. He was a facilitator as a player, making the extra pass, possessing a selfless leadership style that carried into the Catskills. My guest today is part of that Holman family tree. Nat was his great uncle, and make no mistake, that precluded him from being inside the inner sanctum. He had to play by the rules like everybody else, though the rules at the time were much more lax and free. The early 60s at Scatico mirrored much of the burgeoning folk rock scene that was percolating in the lower west side of Manhattan, or Boston, or L.A. Vietnam had not yet fully gripped the nation. A yearning for authenticity within music was spreading. It wasn't about what you were wearing or how you looked, but what you were singing about. The burgeoning rock and roll experiment down in Alabama, where the hourglass of Paul Hornsby and Duane Allman reflected the restrictions placed on musicians, knowing that the whole thing was jive. Unlike most of my Scatico subjects, my guest did not dwell on the sustaining relationships or the brotherhood. He took in the camp experience for what it was: lessons in relationships, partnerships, leadership, spontaneity, and a profound thirsting for music, which he listened to on a portable record player with his bunkmates. He was a camper from 1960 to 1964 when Jack Holman was still in charge. When he came back in 1968 as a waiter, things had morphed into a jamboree of wild experimental learning. Today at Scatico, kids go to the infirmary to receive their medications. Back then, the doctor was handing out scripts to the counselor staff, who for all intents and purposes were living on Red's vitamin C and powder blues. Those were the times, and my guest was marinating in a sea of music that was blending rhythm and blues with soul. Jazz and blues were getting funky before that genre ever even existed. White cats were trying to sing like black artists and pulled it off quite well at universities all over the East Coast, including American University, where my guest was the chair of the concert committee, and he acquired a huge budget. Free concerts, broadcast through the university radio stations, very little overhead, and no liability. My guest is from a lineage of deeply successful people. They have been interconnected on so many levels that it's hard to believe. My guest's mother is 90 years young, and one of the 4 L's on the Jake Feinberg Show is love. So here's a big old heaping helping of love to you, Mrs. Holman. They are not even close to blowing taps yet. Bert Holman, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
Oh, it's great to have you on the program, man.
I'm here in Boston where the sun is shining and 3 feet of snow is on the ground.
Dude, you have had an uncanny amount of snow this year, man.
As they say, it is way stupid.
Yeah, right. Hey, right off the bat, I wanted to talk to you. It's so great to talk to you. I really want you to paint the picture for so many of my friends, my counselors, and their counselors who weren't even born in 1960. If you could talk about specifically, if there was a lot of people bringing a lot of instruments to camp in the early 60s, was there a lot of music? Can you just paint the picture of what Scatico looked like in that early 60s pocket?
I'm happy to, sure. So I was there as a camper from 60 to 64, which was sort of an odd transition period because the baby boomers were really just starting to come in. And you could really feel the transition in terms of the counselors and sort of the much older campers who were really part of the 50s generation versus the 60s generation. So 1960, what I most remember is I had a counselor who had a radio, which was actually odd. Most of the counselors didn't have radios, but we had one who decided to bring a tabletop radio with him and had it plugged in, and he used to have it on all the time. And what I remember was that we had to listen to something called The Breakfast Club, which was a talk show. We couldn't get a lot of stations. There were like local stations, or we got ABC from New York. And it was a chat show. And it was like really a drag because we really wanted to listen to music. We had a little bit of music, and this thing went on, and then we get music later in the day. And the thing I most remember was one song, which was "The Rage of the Summer," which was "Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini." We heard that incessantly. It's the only song I can remember from that year. But what was interesting is that probably in the next year or two, a counselor showed up with a guitar and started playing folk songs. And he was playing, Michael, Row Your Boat Ashore and Kingston Trio type stuff. The other thing I remember is my first year is it was a big deal that a couple of the counselors went to the Dutchess County Fair to see a show. And the show they went to see was The Weavers.
Wow.
I had no idea who The Weavers were. I barely knew who Peter, Paul, and Mary were. But at that point, sort of looking back, I now understand who they are. But I just remember the name, and it was like a really, really big deal for these guys. It was like them seeing the Beatles. We were talking pre-Beatles at this point, And he asked about instruments. Once in a while, he was forced by his parents to bring his trumpet to camp, so he'd practice every day, which, of course, he didn't do.
Right.
We did the first couple of days because the counselors made him, and then they ignored it. For the most part, guitars weren't there yet. The folk thing was just starting to happen.
Right. No, exactly. And then no one was even really no one had plugged in at that point either. But were the sounds of Elvis and Little Richard and those cats, were you getting off on that stuff, or did you find?
Well, we're like right at this transition period. They were already starting to die off.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It was a very odd time musically. I mean, I remember the jukebox in the canteen where you go for, again, I was there my first year. I think I was 9 years old, so you went once or twice for what they called a social, which was a interaction with the way the camp is set up for the listeners who knows, unlike a lot of camps, it's designed as a camp for boys and a camp for girls on the same property, with a invisible dividing line, with minimal interaction, versus co-ed camps where there's total interaction all the time. And so it's like a really big deal to have this social event, and they'd play songs. The counselors would play songs in the jukebox for you. I remember. Some coasters and drifters kind of stuff. And that's as much as I can remember. The twist was still really big. Again, this is 1960. The twist was sort of still there, but it was already like a year or two old, if you know what I mean.
No, absolutely. That was looking back as more of a macro question, because a lot of the cats I've talked to obviously are, more from my generation, and they walked away with, mentors and leadership skills from those mentors and addressing some of their problems. But I just wanted, Bert Holman, about your own opinion, looking back on your experience as a camper. Can you talk about how you feel about your experience at camp?
For me personally, and I'm in a much different situation than other people, I think, I found camp actually really difficult. Because I had the family last name, there were these expectations by a lot of people that I had special privileges. Some people thought I went for free. I was only a nephew, as was my father, we always paid full price, and we were treated actually less than a full price paying camper, because as family members we were expected to suck it up.
Right.
Take the short shake the short stick all the time. It wasn't ever said to you, but that's the way you felt and the way it sort of got presented. And my father told me that was the way, when he was there on some levels. But my father's always really interesting to talk to. My grandfather was, I think, the second oldest of the 7 brothers and 3 sisters that made up the Holman generation at my grandfather's level. What's really interesting is my grandfather's family were all born in America. So we're talking about people, Jews in New York in the 1890s were all born in America. That was a real rarity. They were actually here fairly early as immigrants. All changed their names to have American-sounding names. That's why Jack, who was originally Jacob, was Jack. I forget what Nat's real name was, but it was some very Jewish-sounding name. I have it written down someplace. It's like Yitzhak or something like that,
Right.
And, but they all had very, very Jewish names. But anyway,
I want to piggyback on that.
But my father used to tell me how he used to go up to camp as a child and help open. And all the nephews used to come up and help open the camp, painting the lines on the tennis courts and stuff like that. And they'd be there 2 or 3 weeks before the camp opened, basically given free labor and then pay to be there, you know?
No, tell me a little bit. Okay, but what was the significance of? Okay, so aside from it being remarkable that they were born here, how did it help them being born here? Do you think, as far as assimilation is concerned?
Well, because they were born here, they assimilated. They didn't have an accent. Let's start with that. And they were born here and grew up here in the Lower East Side. The family owned I'll call it a general store. They owned a market.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6 brothers used to deliver all the food. People used to have things delivered to their homes. And the big thing about the boys is they made sure they got paid. I'd seen something that Nat wrote where he talked about how his brothers would go and make sure that people paid when they paid on, when they used to run people's accounts and people get behind, and they'd go and collect. Whatever that meant.
Right.
I don't know anything beyond that. I only know what I've read.
Bert and I have been rapping a little bit off air in the last couple of weeks. Was I dreaming, or did you say you did at one point there was a record player, portable player in the bunk that you would listen to records on?
Oh, yeah. 1964, a guy named Larry Puchal had been in my bunk for 3 years, is no longer alive. His brother Mike's still alive, a bit younger. Larry shows up at camp with a portable record player. I'd never seen one of these things before. Coolest thing in the world. And about 10, 12, 14 singles. And we start playing them. We used to play them. We were allowed to play it during rest hour. Rest hour is a period where you're supposed to stay on your bed and rest.
Right.
And read comic books, write letters home, whatever you're supposed to do, talk quietly, but you're not allowed to run around. But at this point, we were like the youngest of the older kids. We had 2 pretty cool counselors, both of which had been former campers, who kind of understood understood us. We were not. It was not the most athletic group of kids. There were 1 or 2. Actually, there's one guy, Mike Bush, who later became the camp doctor for many years. His kids went there.
I'm a dear friend. No, Mike is a dear friend of mine. He's a great guy. I love him. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike was in my bunk for 3 years before I left. And anyway, he was in this bunk as well. But we used to sit there and listen to this guy's record player, and we used to rate the records. And of course, we got tired of listening to the A sides. We started listening to the B sides. The one thing that I really remember is Larry was totally enamored with this new girl named Barbara Streisand.
Right.
And he used to play People over and over and over again. And this was like before it was like really a hit.
Right, of course.
It was just starting. We had a radio. I brought a radio up to camp as well, so we could listen to music. But we were pretty much trapped listening to the same songs over and over again on Top 40 radio because that's all there was. But we used to listen to these. We started listening to B-sides. Larry started sending home and having his parents send up more records. It was still all singles at this point. But we were getting a lot of rock stuff, and we were having a really good time.
Oh, I mean, this is just fascinating. Talking to Bert Holman, okay, so you felt like it was an unspoken. I know exactly what you're saying. I don't know what you were feeling, but as far as it was non-verbalized, but you always felt like you needed to suck it up. Was there a Holman within the camp that you actually got off on, though? I mean, for instance, like Nat really wasn't running any kind of day-to-day operations. Scatico was more Jack, right?
Well, Jack was the operations. He and his wife, Daisy. Nat was more of a figurehead. Nat's wife also had been ill for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really sort of dealing with that and not always there, but he was there a lot of the time, really as a figurehead. And the big thing for the older kids is he'd do a basketball clinic. That was like always a big deal. And he'd be there for like on the weekends for the events and stuff like that. I was there the year he was inducted to the Basketball Hall of Fame. He was like just over the moon about that. I think he was really, really flattered.
What were his clinic? What were his clinics like? I mean, was he? He was a really gifted player, though. I mean, he was obviously he was a professional.
Well, yeah, he'd sort of lecture, he'd demonstrate. The funny thing is, Nat lived in the town. I lived in Teaneck for a number of years while I was in middle school, and he did a clinic for my Boy Scout troop, and it was really interesting because that was the one that I really remember. Is he shows up in City College, sort of like sweats or like warm-up suits.
Sure.
And he's standing at the top of the key, and he's talking about basketball and teamwork and things like that. And takes the ball, and he's bouncing a little bit, and he takes, a shot from almost the top of the key, two-hand set shot, which is the way he used to play, not the way people play anymore. And he takes the shot, and it hits the front, hits the front ribbon, bounces out. Takes a second shot, bounces out. Takes a little bit of a jump shot even, which was really not his game. Sort of banks it in, but just sort of just gets in.
Right.
And then he hits 7 in a row from the top of the key.
Oh.
Well, we're in like 7th grade. There's nobody in 7th grade who can shoot from the top of the key. And here's this, what we thought, old man. He was probably 65 at the time.
Right.
Because my guess this is like 1964, 65, someplace in there.
And there was no three-point line, so he was just draining them from way out beyond.
Yeah. It's just the top of the key, just start shooting further back than the foul line.
I think this is just fascinating, though, because, Bert, okay, so he was obviously distracted, and rightfully so. His wife was not feeling well, but, when I come to camp, Nat Holman tournament, Nat Holman, he founded the camp, but was really, who would you say was the Holman that was most involved with before Irwin took over the camp? Like, who was involved with, yeah. Go ahead.
My understanding of the history of the camp, you look back, and I actually read a book that Jack wrote. There's a camp called Surprise Lake Camps, which is a Jewish charity camp in Cold Springs, New York. Jack was a school teacher, and Jack got involved in this camp, from what I understand, as a counselor, as a very young school teacher. Eddie Cantor, who was a famous actor, was one of their early campers. Mm-hmm. Eddie ended up raising a ton of money for this camp. Still in existence today. It's still a nonprofit camp and offers scholarships at reduced rates based on need. And it's a very ethnically oriented camp. But I think from what I can see, this is where Jack got the idea. He learned how to run a camp, running this Jewish charity camp. And then realized he's got a brother who's a celebrity, mm-hmm. and the two of them put it together, and they went and rented a camp in Wingdale, New York, for a couple of years. I want to say 3 or 4 years is my best recollection without fully researching. It's just something I read in some notes I'd made not too long ago in discussion with my father. My father always talked about how he went to Wingdale for a couple of years after it had been open a year or two, and then he went to Wingdale for a couple of years. And then what happened was, in the 30s, they raised enough money and they bought the property that they have now in Elizaville, New York. They had rented the other camp. What's funny is my father's sister, who's 7 years older than he was, always talked about how she only went to camp in Wingdale. One of my father's counselors said he was only a counselor in Wingdale. A family friend who I'm not sure. Carl's probably passed at this point. One of his brothers, two of his brothers, I know, are still alive. But they always talk about how they only went to camp in Wingdale. These are the real pioneers of the camp. It was only a boys' camp at that point, and then they opened the camp, and they bought the camp in Elizaville, which was probably a lease purchase of some sort. And been there since 35, I think, 36, something like that. My father was born in 24, and I think he started going to camp in 31.
I just want to, as in the camper years, you mentioned that you had a couple of really cool counselors. I'm always interested to know. You hear about Manny Tunkel, you hear about a lot of other, sort of these glory figures. But in your mind, when you were a camper, can you name a couple of guys on the staff that were cool to you?
One who I just found out this past week passed away, Richie Haft, who had been my counselor.
Really?
Wow. I like Richie a real lot. He'd been my color ward general. I thought I was really lucky when he was my counselor my last year as a camper. He was a guy who just bleeded greed. He's not even gray. He just bled greed. He's a little older than Manny. His brother Steve was was in Manny's bunk, and Jimmy Dolan's bunk. Those guys were all about the same age. There's a guy named Larry Fabian, a guy named Steve Heyman. These guys were all campers who later became counselors. We had, when I was a camper, we had a lot of guys who sort of were campers and then came back as junior counselors and counselors. There was a real tradition of that at the camp. There's a lot of return. I mean, my father was a counselor for several years. My father also tells the story that he was, I think, working as a junior counselor but because of the war, had started working as like as a senior counselor, a division. I think he made him a division leader, and he wanted to get paid more money. And Jack told me he wasn't old enough to get more money. And at that point, my father said, "You know what? Get another counselor."
Wow. I mean, this is just phenomenal.
He said, I had enough. You're taking advantage of me as a family member. But that's just the way it was. I give Jack credit. Somebody told me recently, somebody I met, as you mentioned, I work in the music business as well, and I met somebody, and I can't even remember who it was recently, who said to me that his family sold the camp meat, for their dining room. And he goes, my grandmother always, he said, first I said to me, are you related to this Daisy Holman? I go, yeah, she's my great aunt. He goes, my grandmother hated her. I said, really, why? And he said, because she always took the 2% discount, which is 2% net 10 days, meaning if you paid your bill within 10 days, you could deduct 2%. They were tough. They fought hard. There's great stories. There's a guy named Chaz Levine.
Sure.
Who I don't know if you.
No, I know Chaz. Sure.
I've known Chaz a long time. I knew him as a camper. I knew his brothers. His first cousin went to high school and college with me. They lived like 3 houses apart. Chaz is really good friends with one of my current friends. And I went to my friend's 50th birthday party, and Chaz had come in from camp with his wife Ellen. And he said to me, he says, yeah, we're making some changes this year at camp. He goes, you know that lamp that was on the bookkeeper's desk? I go, you mean my Aunt Rose's desk? He goes, yeah. He goes, Jack's lamp. I go, right. He goes, you know what that's for, right? And everybody's sitting there is going like, what are these guys talking about? I said, oh yeah, I know what it's for. He goes, you tell everybody. They won't believe me. Jack had a single bulb desk lamp on his desk without a bulb in it. If you needed a light bulb because your light bulb burnt out, you had to bring the burnt out bulb to Jack. He would screw it in and test it. If it didn't light up, he'd give you a new bulb.
Oh.
Chaz, I think, still has the lamp.
I mean,
I mean, they were tough. They ran a very tight business.
Do you feel like you said your division was not overly athletic, but was there? The counselors didn't really put an onus on that. Was there a lot of creative sort of? I mean, I've talked to Dave about this too. I mean, when I went to camp, he was still given the line about rest hour. You should lay on your bed. Well, certainly that changed. I mean, we were out shooting hoops or whatever else. But did your counselors? Was it always a place where you were allowed to sort of tap into what you were comfortable with? Did you do? Can you talk about some activities that were pretty outside the box that might...
there was definitely space for that. I mean, look, one of the great things for me is we got to do riflery. I never touched a gun in my life.
Right.
It's the only times I really touched a gun. And we got to shoot at targets and actually experience what it was to fire a gun. That was really interesting. I learned archery. I learned how to hold a bow and shoot an arrow. Did some arts and crafts. But I was a kid who always was willing to try stuff. I did a little camping. Which really sort of inspired me into joining the Boy Scouts, which I really enjoyed. I was in the right troop in the town I grew up in that it was a troop that was not really into the dogma Boy Scouts, but was into having a good time in the woods, which we did. We had a great time in the woods. I learned how to camp, but did we wear pristine uniforms? Nah. Did we earn a lot of badges? No. But we had a great time and really learned how to camp.
Right, and that's what is most important. When you Okay, so
I mean, the aquatics at Scoutico were great. I mean, you got boating, canoeing, sailing. I learned how to do all that kind of stuff. I mean, I really did a lot of different things. For me, the big moment was, when I mentioned Richie Hamp before, I saw him at a camp reunion. And I went over to actually thank him, and he was like stunned. He didn't even know what to say, and I thanked him, because he really gave me self-esteem. My last year at camp, they came. I don't know what prompted these guys. Maybe it's because of the way we were all pushing, but they decided to play flag football, and they let us play 11 on 11 because we had about 30 kids in the group, and we went out and borrowed all football jerseys from all the counselors, and we played it. Well, I played tackle football in a Little League type setup called Pop Warner, though that's not the league we were in the town that I grew up in. I knew how to play football. I knew how to use my body. I knew how to push through a line. I knew how to hit somebody. I knew how to block somebody because I played line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, here I was just a middling athlete. All of a sudden, we're playing football, and I'm blowing through people. I am tackling people in the backfield. In play, we were playing sort of like quasi flag. We actually didn't have flags. We had a towel in the back of our pants. Before the official flag football rules,
Yep.
And we were also sort of playing like quasi tackle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could pull the towel, but you could take them down. And I was taking people down. They were astounded. They didn't know where I came from. They finally found a sport that I knew how to play. Actually, what happened was my eyesight was changing, and it affected me playing baseball, and it affected me playing basketball. I now wear glasses, but didn't know it at the time. And having that little bit of depth perception off, it didn't enable you to play as well as you could play.
Can you talk? This is just so important. I mean, how did you? How impacted were you by the British invasion stuff musically? Because you were out of camp until '68, but at that point the Beatles had really established themselves. A lot of Indian music was coming here. A lot of the old blues guys were being discovered. I'd just like to know what you were marinating on in that time before you got back to camp.
Well, I mean, I was a radio kid. I got a portable radio when I was 13, and it never left my hands. Mm-hmm. One of the great things I learned with radios, especially at night, when especially on Sundays, when ABC and MCA, the two stations, I grew up in suburban New York City, went off the air. And living in New Jersey, if you turned the radio a certain way and you played with the tuner, first I started listening to the R&B stations, WRL in New York, and eventually that would go to gospel late at night on Sunday nights. So I started spinning the dials, and I found WKBW in Buffalo, CKLW in Windsor Locks, Ontario, which is essentially Detroit, WOWO from Fort Wayne. Once in a while you get a station from up in Boston. These stations were all playing songs that were not available on New York City radio. All of a sudden, I was on the cutting edge. I was hearing records that nobody else was hearing, except the kids who were listening to late-night radio, and I knew only 2 or 3 people who were doing it.
What kind of records?
Really
what kind of records? Can you name?
Got me ahead of the curve on a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Just I listen to radio all the time. I was really loving music. I was starting to go out and buy some records here and there, buying singles. One of the great things, I went to see the Young Rascals reunion events that they did. I sort of through a business friend. I know Felix Cavallari's daughter, and through her I had met Felix. I went and saw Felix afterwards after the show. The second time I went and I brought all of my old picture sleeve singles and my original mono albums and asked the band to sign them. I never asked people to sign anything. I wanted these guys to sign this. This was important to me. And Eddie Bugatti looked at me and goes, "Man, where'd you get these?" I said, "They're mine. I bought them when I was a kid." He goes, "Where are you from?" I go, "New Jersey." He goes, "Where?" I go, "Teaneck." He goes, "Garfield." We start laughing. He said, "You had to be from New Jersey to have these records. Nobody else would have these records." Of course, I had them, and he said to him, "Mono, they're better in mono." I said, "Yeah, well, they're also $1 cheaper at 2 guys in mono, and I could buy an extra record."
That's right.
Because to me, it was all about how many records I could buy, not mono or stereo.
I want to go back. This is very important for myself. This is what I get off on. Okay, you were listening to. Can you name at least some of the R&B and soul and some of the stuff you were hearing, the songs on the radio that nobody else in New York was listening to?
I mean, it was more like the ones that I most remember is "Ramblin' Gamblin' Man" by Bob Seger's System. That was a huge hit in Detroit. It barely touched it in New York. Wow. It eventually became a sort of quasi-hit. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff you would just hear early. You'd hear a week or 2 early. You hear a Stone single a week before you'd hear it in New York. That kind of stuff is what you'd really hear.
It's amazing to me. Why would it? Explain to the audience why you would hear it earlier than you would assume. New York would be the loading zone. So why would it be?
No, with star artists, New York would be the loading zone. But otherwise, it would be based on regionality. If an artist was bigger in a different region, and also New York only played proven hits. So that the way the music business worked is records would be promoted in the hinterlands to small stations who would give it a try. and try and build a groundswell.
Right.
Sometimes it have to do with an area. You know, a lot of the R&B stuff came out of the South, bigger black audiences. You know, a city like Birmingham, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia, those were those records broke out of. But so many times you hear about people, you know, records that break out of a certain market, usually because that's where they were from. Paul Revere and the Raiders were from Seattle, Washington. That's where that stuff all came from.
And then eventually, once they got big enough, they signed a deal with Columbia. This is beautiful. This is phenomenal, man.
Even when they're there, I mean, the records, you know, they start regionally and they break out. You know, Jay Giles came out of Boston, of course. You know, and even today, you still see records in a sense get broken that way. New York tended to be one of the last places where things got played. That was the ultimate jewel.
Well, this Bob Seger thing, that is a nugget that's a jewel right there. Bert Holman.
Yeah, and the other one's, Ted Nugent and the Amboy Dukes, Journey to the Center of Your Mind, which is a couple of years later, but still the same thing. Seeger was this huge star in Detroit and like kind of well known in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and nobody in New York knew who he was.
Yeah, and then by the late '80s, early '90s, we were singing his "Warmed Over" Against the Wind stuff for the Camp Sings.
Yeah.
And, this is phenomenal. You come back to camp in '68, best you can. How in subtle ways or in more noticeable ways? How did the camp change? I mean, we're going from Jack Holman screwing in bulbs to test if they're blown out, and then you got Irwin now, and at the helm. What did you notice as the differences between the two leaderships?
Well, there was some start of modernization. I mean, what happened was just the whole culture was changing. It was actually much tougher for Irwin in terms of dealing with the staffing.
Why is that?
I think that the staffing was the kids were, or the college kids were not as intimidated. I mean, look, I was there as a employee, 68 and 69. I got there in 68, everybody was drinking. That was the big thing. The kitchen staff, which were all Latinos from Bed-Stuy,
mm-hmm.
were smoking weed. But didn't know it in the beginning, but as time went on in the summer, I figured it out. And I negotiated my way into getting them to turn me on.
You want to? Can we go through that?
I heard so much about it. I'm watching these guys. They're sitting there smoking it and laughing. I'm going, that doesn't look very harmful.
Right.
You got to remember, 68 is the summer of rage in Chicago.
That's right. And
right. We're starting to really see real changes. We had the Summer of Love in 67.
Right, this is amazing. This is so. It was so mellow in '64, and then it became extremely volatile. The war was obviously, but this was all you can honestly tell the audience that this was all bubbling at camp as well.
Yeah, no, you definitely see it because you got these college kids coming in as counselors. There's one woman I remember, this woman Diane, who went to the University of Buffalo. She took off for 3 days to go to Chicago to protest the Democratic Convention.
Unbelievable. At Scatico, that's I can see.
And the funny thing is that her father was the head of waterfront at another camp. Her parents are actually senior counselors at another camp. She didn't want to work for under her father.
And
she took a job at Scatico. She was actually there a couple of years. I lost track of her, but I just remember she was very, very much a feminist without it being obnoxious, but a feminist and very politically motivated.
Did you connect with?
It was like she was a year older than I was. I was friends with her, and I remember going out with her a couple of times more as friends than anything else, even sort of like post camp. I go see her in Queens, and we go out and spend the evening together. She was really pretty cool. So that's 68. The funny thing is, I get turned on by the kitchen guys, and I say to this woman friend of mine, I said, "Oh man, you can't." Who's a counselor at camp? I said, "You can't believe this. I got high for the first time."
Right.
She goes, "Can you get any more?" I go, "You've done it?" She goes, "I've done it twice." And she tells us another friend of ours who's another woman who was a counselor there. Both these women, I think, were division leaders at the time. She goes, She's from Manhattan. She's been doing it since she was 12.
Oh.
So the two of them cajoled me into getting the kitchen staff to get us some weed, and the three of us were smoking weed that summer and doing it on the QT and not talking to anybody about it.
Did you have was there a
I come back a year later, and it was like Haight-Ashbury. It was unbelievable.
There was but I mean, it was still not. It wasn't because not cigarettes were open, it was legal, but people weren't smoking pot in public. It was all on the down low, but people.
Oh no, it was all underground,
right,
and all very quiet. But went from myself and two other people that I knew of, and some kitchen guys, to about a third of the staff.
This
smoking weed, although everyone was still being really quiet and careful about it, because look, it's illegal. Nobody did it in front of the kids. It was a big thing at night,
Sure. No, it's phenomenal to hear this stuff.
And that was also the year. That was also the year that the camp took a field trip to Tanglewood, the same year as Woodstock. Woodstock was very near the camp, for those people who don't know. It was on the other side of the river, but about the same point in New York State. And we were told that if we left to go to Woodstock, we'd be fired. One or two people did leave and were fired. Being a family member, I had to suck up and not do what I wanted to do, which was go to the show. But a week later, they had a show at Tanglewood with the Jefferson Airplane, The Who, and B.B. King. And they took a camp field trip there.
Oh, my God. This is unreal.
And they took a whole bunch of campers, and they had some extra tickets that I was able to buy on as an employee. I couldn't travel with the camps. I had to drive my own car because I wasn't a counselor.
Dude, you were held to such high account.
Not only me, but I think it was true. I think it's true of many of the staff, But I wasn't a counselor. I was a waiter, as the head waiter at that point. So I drove up with this other kid who was a waiter. We drove up, smoked weed all the way there and all the way back. Went there. I had a camper girlfriend, totally against the rules.
Yeah, right. No, we talked about that a little bit. No,
but there's one thing we left out here that's really important.
Go ahead, yeah.
1962. There's a camper in camp who sings lead in the camp show. The camp show is Gigi, and she sings "Don't Get a Kick Out of Champagne." I remember it so vividly. And they used to put on these camp shows, usually based on Broadway theatrical plays. I remember seeing Guys and Dolls and a couple other shows like that. And it was sort of like my introduction to Broadway shows. It was watching these camp productions of these shows. I remember seeing what's the one with Marie in it? West Side Story.
Oh yeah.
And the older campers would act it out and stuff. Well, 1962, this girl with red hair sings Gigi, and the next year, she's not in camp, and she's got a #1 record. It's My Party. It's Leslie Gore.
Oh, wow. No,
Leslie just passed
that's
away.
Right. No,
very sad.
I know. Was that about a week ago or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. Brother Michael was also a camper there as well.
Wow.
But Leslie, one year she's singing in camp. The next year she's got a hit record, and the following year she shows up in a limo to visit her brother at camp. So vividly remember it.
Bert, I want to ask you something. Tell me, we opened up our interview with you with a track off 12-13-70 American University. The Allman Brothers. I really want you to talk about the feeling you had inside and that experience first time when you met the band, when they came to your university under your guidance to play that show, and just the impact that it left on you at that time.
Well, September 70, I'm a freshman in college at American University. I had become a Fillmore kid at this point, where I was going to the Fillmore every weekend, somewhat my junior year, mainly my senior year in high school. I'd gone to the Electric Circus, which was a alcohol-free club that you could go to. It was basically a juice bar in New York City, sort of pre-Fillmore. I saw Chambers Brothers. I saw Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys a couple other times. Sort of like it's kind of a disco with live bands is the best way to describe it. Psychedelic disco. And then the Fillmore opened as a theater, which was more serious music. I started going to that on a regular basis, saw a lot of bands. And get to college in the fall of 1970, and I go to a stadium show, which is billed as a one-day festival with Grand Funk Railroad, not a band I was totally enthused at seeing, Pacific Gas and Electric, the Allman Brothers band, and there's one or two other local bands, and there's somebody else on. I can't remember who else was on. It was called Berlin Airlift, was what they titled the show. But I saw the Allman Brothers, and I thought they were amazing.
What stood out to you? What stood out to you about it?
Just the intensity of the guitar interplay,
Mm-hmm.
and the intensity of the dual drummers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then this wailing, soulful blues voice. I'd gotten really into blues music.
Sure.
And I got to college. I met a guy named Steve Leeds, who's now head of artist relations at Sirius Music in New York. Steve was working on the radio station, and I went to his apartment one night with him, and turns out he grew up in the town next to mine, and he kind of like explained to me how the music business worked in Washington, D.C. I knew a little bit about the music business already. I had an agent for the William Morris Agency had moved in next door to my best friend. He gave me 12th row center tickets to see the Rolling Stones in 1969 on Thanksgiving night, and I had this epiphany going, this is the greatest scam ever. How do I get in on this? Getting paid to go to rock shows. That was the epiphany that night, sitting in the 12th row center watching the Stones, and that's the Gimme Shelter movie.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there watching this show and going, this is unbelievable. I got to figure out how to get paid to do this. And this guy, Jay Jacobs, told me, get involved with your college concerts. So when I got to American, I met this guy first weekend who told me he's on the concert committee and they're looking for people to be on the committee, but you got to do all this grunt work. And I said, sure. I want it in. So I started going to the meetings and doing whatever they asked me to do, put up posters and help move things around and what have you. And I got really friendly with the guy who was in charge of the committee. And they were trying to book a band, and he was 4 years older than I was, and not quite as attuned to what was happening musically in terms of the real cutting edge stuff. And he gave us a list of acts that were available to book a show, and I said, you got to book this band, the Allman Brothers. They're amazing. You got to book them. They're going to be huge. By the time we get them, they're going to be huge.
Right.
Well, it took a little longer for it to happen, but I got him to book it, and I basically helped him run the whole show. He didn't want anything to do with it. I got to meet the band for the first time. The story I always tell is I took Dwayne Allman and Barry Oakley and Red Dog and one of the other roadies in my 67 Impala to Roy Rogers to go get something to eat, and Roy Rogers fast food, and Dwayne looked at me and goes, is it okay for hippies to go into this place?
Oh.
And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, I've been here tripping all the time.
Yeah, right.
It's totally cool. I only live down the street. I live about 2 blocks away from this place, so I ain't there a lot. So we're going, yeah, Roy's is cool, and that was in the band played 2 sets, and they were great, and I just sort of was around it.
Can you, I would love if you could talk to me about, do you think that they were I'm fascinated with the Grateful Dead two drummers, but could you talk about how Johnny and Butch played together? I mean, who kind of held down the rhythm, or what were their roles? I think the double drums was something that made that time period in electric rock so just unbelievable. But I would love you to talk about their roles as the double drummers.
Well, in hindsight, I have a lot more insight into what was sort of how it sort of came about, which I didn't have then. The way it's been explained to me is that Dwayne Allman had seen bands like Otis Redding and James Brown, who used to have 2 drummers. Now, J-Mo, who played in Otis Redding's band, was one of 2 drummers in Otis's band, explained to me that they played, 3-minute songs and didn't stop for 45 minutes or an hour, was how these bands used to play. And there wasn't really great amplification, so the drummers really had to pound it. Well, a drummer couldn't keep it up for 60 minutes and not start to drag or not quite play with the intensity. So what they used to do is they used to alternate drummers each song. So the drummers played every other song.
And then
that's how it started.
That's
Dwayne
so interesting.
Loved the idea of having 2 drummers.
Yeah.
And he sort of came with, we'll switch off or something. So when the band first formed, the way the band first formed was really a rehearsal where they all sort of were in the same room. It was like an amalgamation of jams that eventually sort of solidified into a certain lineup. And J-Mo was staying at Butch's house in Jacksonville, and Dwayne was staying with a girlfriend. Dwayne had brought J-Mo to Jacksonville to sort of come hang out, and they were basically trying to steal Barry Oakley and have a power trio.
Right.
Barry wouldn't come without his guitar player, Dickie. They brought Reese Wining, who was a keyboard player, to come to the jam. And since J-Mo was going to play, they kind of, had Butch come down and play also. I don't think they were really there yet with the two drummers, but once Dwayne heard it, he loved it. Butch is really the powerhouse drummer. Butch is the freight train. Butch is the locomotive. He drives that.
Right.
J-Mo, who comes from a jazz background and a marching band background, listens. And he plays accents, and he plays counter rhythms. If you see J-Mo in his own band play today, where he's the only drummer, he plays totally differently. J-Mo's a very attuned drummer. Billy Cobham, though, who told me, really explained it to me once. Allman Brothers were opening for Mahavishnu Orchestra, I believe at Stony Brook. And Billy's downstairs in the basement, and he hears the band playing, and he goes, "Oh, my God, listen to that drummer, man. Who is this guy, man? This guy's blowing me off the stand." Billy thought he was a pretty hot-shot drummer, and Billy was a hot-shot drummer. He goes, "That guy is unbelievable what he's playing. Oh, man, I got to go upstairs and see who this is." He said the only thing that was more amazing to him about having one guy play like that was that two guys were doing this. Because Billy couldn't imagine playing with another drummer like that. Billy isn't capable of that. He can't hear how to play the spaces or leave spaces for the other guy to play.
Yeah, I mean...
He just is so amazed, because these guys, if you see them play live, and you hear it in certain songs, they will be playing the exact same thing in unison, and then they'll divide and play two totally different things. And then they'll be playing, if you watch them, Butch can be playing his rack tom and his snare, and J-Mo will be playing his snare and his floor tom, and all of a sudden, on a certain beat, they both hit a cymbal crash at the same time.
You're really articulating.
And then they go back to what they're playing.
No, I mean, Billy, I've done a couple long-form interviews with Billy, and, he came out of, he played with Horace Silver, so he must have just been like, Billy has jazz chops. It got to the point with Mahavishnu where, they were channeling a lot of spiritual energy and then putting that into, these long, almost channeling John Coltrane, but,
although Billy's not very spiritual.
No. No, but as far as
he just thought the whole McLaughlin thing was pretty funny. But Billy also, the main thing I heard Billy, because I work with Billy a little bit. Billy, I did a drum clinic with him one day, and these guys were there, and he started talking to them, and he realized that they came from one of the guys said to him, "Well, so I don't really come from the world you come from. We're in the marching band world." He goes, "Oh yeah, which band?" And the guy tells him, and he says, "Brooklyn, right?" The guy goes, "Yeah." He goes, "So-and-so still write your charts?" The guy looks at him and goes, "You know Mr. So-and-so?" Billy goes, "Oh yeah, man, he writes great charts." Billy starts saying, "I used to be in such and such marching band." Billy comes from the marching band world. He's totally enamored with the marching band world. And we're talking about real competitive marching bands.
Right.
Sort of show marching bands. They have trucks and equipment. They're almost like private clubs. So Billy comes from a lot of different worlds.
Bert, we're gonna continue on, but we have before we have to go to the top of the hour, we just have to take a break. But I wanted to ask you, as we finish up the live portion here, just talk a little bit about your mother and her significance in your life, and what makes you smile when you think about. Well, she's still with us, and Taps isn't going to play for a while. But talk about your mother a little bit.
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about. My mother's my mother. She's 90 years old. It's really pretty amazing. The tough thing about my mother is that she was an only child. Her mother died when she was about 14 or 15. Her father died when she was around 21, 22, someplace in there. So in essence, she's looked at herself as an orphan, with no first cousins, which gives her sort of an interesting perspective. She lived through the Depression, tough times. Her father had to board her out with family. But she's a very bright woman. She's to this day, she's very proud of the fact that, as she calls it, she's a Hunter girl. She went to Hunter University in New York City. She's a true New Yorker, born in Manhattan. And God bless her, still alive at 90, still driving, living in her house in Teaneck, New Jersey. Doesn't drive on highways. Memory's not so good,
right.
But she's still with us. As she said to me, she never thought she'd live to be this old. She's astounded. I think she also finds it hard. She's outlived most of her friends. She outlived my father. She and my father were very devoted to each other. I think her biggest regret in life right now is that she can't have a dog. She's too old to have a dog.
How often?
But when I go visit her,
Yeah,
visit her, I bring my dog to visit her, and she loves it.
All right, Bert, hold on. We're going to do a little bit more.
Yep.
Do you have time to hang on?
Sure.
Okay, we'll be back in just a little bit. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be right back.
I've been playing blues for quite a while. I've been around the world a few times, but I don't understand. I just like to play the blues. It's not all the money that I want. I just like to play the blues. And I like for everybody to get together and all of us play the blues and let's have a good time. Because blues is where it's at. I'm telling you, I love it. I can't help but play it. So when you wake up in the morning,
You know, a gig.
and ain't got no money, or no gig, whatever you call it, you ain't got nothing but the blues no way, baby. Or either your old lady gonna do yagging you and arguing with you, telling you what you get up and do something. And go to the steel mill, and you know you're gonna do singing that music the blues too. So sometimes you really don't know what to do. And when you get word, all you can do is reach and grab your harmonica and try to play the blues a little bit. Here's the blues.
Here we go.
Become the concert chairman at American. Was that during the time of that was after you brought the Allmans in, right?
Yeah, my sophomore year, I became the concert chairman.
Please take me through. You don't have to give a dissertation on the Washington music scene or how it works, but I'm interested in knowing how you finagled that this budget out of, and why the money was even there to begin with.
What happened was at AU, before I got there, they had some serious. American University was a private university, so their tuition continuously went up, and they had a student activities fee, I believe, of $27.50, or $27 a year for to fund all of the student activities. And they were doing some concerts in the Leonard Gymnasium, which is no longer there, which was a World War II temporary building that held about 800 people, maybe 1,000 if you jammed them in. On ostensibly a basketball courts with some, a small high school basketball court, probably smaller than any high school basketball court you see today, which had some bleachers on either side and a stage at one end. And they were charging people for the shows. And people were complaining that they couldn't get in because there weren't enough tickets, and they were complaining about how much the tickets cost. So by the time I got there as a freshman, the student government had cajoled the university into doubling the student activities fee to $54, and they made all the activities free. So all of a sudden, we now had free outdoor concerts.
Wow. Oh.
In the amphitheater. And it's funny, it looked so big to me when I was there, and I saw it recently, and it's so small, I can't believe I did shows there.
What is about maybe 500, 1,000?
Yeah, it probably holds, in my estimation now, it holds 1,000, 1,500 people with people standing around it. At the time, we thought it held 2,000, 2,500. I don't think so now.
Right.
Now that I look at it. It's way smaller than I remembered. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I went, man, what were we thinking? It's like a little bowl surrounded by a bunch of dormitories. And so anyway, they had this budget, for $54, overall $54 a year that they collected from all 5,000 undergraduate students, basically $250,000, which they used to fund student activities. Well, somehow, and people were always complaining about, we want better concerts, we want better bands. And the problem, to get better bands, you had to spend more money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, somehow we cajoled them into giving us a budget of like $78,000 for the year in my junior year.
That would be the equivalent of how much today?
Oh God, who knows? Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right,
It was like astronomical.
Huge.
I mean, as I remember, I think we paid the Grateful Dead $35,000 or $40,000, maybe even $25,000. I'm trying to remember. We had the band Chicago. Those were the two big bands that we did that we had these huge budget for, and then we did stuff for a little less expensive. We also had money for the expenses to do the show.
What about
sound and lights and security and electricity, and I rented a stage, and I brought in renting a stage, which raised the stage and made it a little more professional. I brought in a tent to put over the stage, even though it was stuff was by today's standards is beyond funkiness.
No, but hold on.
Jerry Garcia insisted that we build an 8-foot wooden wall at the back of the stage so that they could have better reflective sound on stage.
Mm-hmm. This is unbelievable.
The great thing about it is Jerry taught me that. I had the same problem with the Allman Brothers in Santa Barbara, where we used to play at the Santa Barbara County Bowl. The band always complained about how thin the sound sounded, and there were sound ordinance problems in Santa Barbara, and how the band would start to turn up and they'd have problems there. They tell them they're playing too loud. And they said, well, we can't even hear ourselves. I figured it out. There was no back wall. So I had them park our tractor trailer right behind the stage to act as that reflective wall. And it actually seriously helped the band and their sound on stage. After that, I've had long conversations with the building manager about it and said, look, you guys got to figure out how to put a wall up here. This is what your problem is.
Can you talk, in a more of a, macro view about the overall sort of feeling that was in place once you got these, the Dead or, Chicago, even some of the smaller acts, how positive, talk about the energy level following those shows at the university. I mean, was it palpable? What was the kind of carryover effect aside from just people want to talk about, they want to, glamorize this stuff, that it was huge amounts of partying, people were blowing their hair out, dancing, naked girls. I'm sure that's all true. But in the long term, about, mindset, about enlightenment, can you talk a little bit about how, if you feel that you were responsible for, getting that momentum going?
Well, a segment of the audience, a segment of the campus students felt it had a hipness to their school.
Right.
It became a very hip school. We had, way people used to talk about is, how cool is your school? Well, who played there? What bands did you have?
Right.
And, that was always, people said, well, we had the Dead, and kids in America said, so did we. Ours was free, though. You had to pay to go to yours, Sort of the one-upsmanship. The plus and the minus was it's Washington, D.C., which is a real city, and you can get people to play. The downside is there's a lot of competition. There are five major schools there. My freshman year, I saw the Dead play at Georgetown in their gymnasium where there was a riot. I saw Traffic play down there. Little Feat used to be playing in D.C. all the time. I remember seeing Linda Ronstadt playing with Jackson Brown, and Jackson was actually opening for her. And Lowell George, who was her boyfriend at the time, was playing in her band.
Yeah, Kenny Gradney talks about the first time he tried out for Little Feat, and he walked into the back parking lot, and Lowell George is sitting there, and there's 3 girls around him, and it was Linda, and it was Bonnie Raitt, and now the other one's escaping me right now, but Emmylou Harris, and they were all just trying to pick his brain for tips. It's just a phenomenal. And so during your college years, you also, within that budget, you were also getting a salary too for being this impresario as well. Is that right?
I didn't get paid at all. It's totally volunteer.
So tell me,
I didn't make a dime.
So when you graduated, this is crucial. What did you do?
Well, what was happening is because I was doing the shows at the school,
right.
I met a number of people in the local music scene, and I started working with some local promoters down there on the side. They were doing shows at the Alexandria Roller Rink, which was a roller skating rink, and they were doing Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath. Humble Pie opened for them. I remember meeting D'Anthony, who was the manager. What's his name? Mark Bolan, T-Rex.
Oh, yeah.
Alice Cooper. They were the first promoters to do Alice Cooper. The guys that I got involved with included a local DJ and a local concert promoter. And what they used to do is they used to book all these 1,000-seat multi-purpose rec centers that were sort of located all around the Beltway in D.C., and they'd bring in people like bands from Detroit, like Alice Cooper, Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, a band called Crow, a band called Brownsville Station. And they'd bring these bands in, and they'd play 4 shows, 2 on Friday and 2 on Saturday in these different rec centers. So they'd be playing, like, in Maryland at 8 o'clock on Friday night, and at 10 o'clock they'd be playing in Virginia. And they do this they do this Friday and Saturday nights.
Right.
So you'd end up, and they'd get 2 sets of gear for the band. They'd get two local bands who'd supply the gear for them. Mitch Ryder's Detroit used to do this. Detroit Wheels, band called Catfish. I mean, the bands are all starting to come back to me as I start to think about them. And these were all this Detroit blues rock stuff, and they were basically like sock hops with like high school kids, because the high school kids couldn't get into the city to get to shows. There was no public transportation in D.C. So this became big social events. And I started working these shows with these guys, helping them set them up, meeting these young bands, and putting these shows on. They started doing bigger shows. I started doing bigger stuff, and those guys were paying me a little bit here and there.
Right.
I met some local musicians who I got involved with, and with their local bands, going to play college, mixers and stuff like that. And it was really sort of learning from local sound company I was doing a little work for. I was doing it more for the education than anything else, and just to go to shows.
What do you consider, like at what years, probably like 75, 76, this was going on pretty much?
Well, this is 70 to 74.
Right.
72, I had met John Scher through another student who came in as a buyer, basically as a middleman between me and the agents. He's the one who got us the Grateful Dead in Chicago. And John knew that I had career aspirations. So I basically parlayed from him a summer job. First year I worked at Rose in 1973. I'm just remembering. Sorry, yeah, 73. I worked doing security at Roosevelt Stadium, which was in Jersey City, where he was doing a number of stadium-sized shows.
Oh my God, the band played there in '73. It was a great show. For unreal.
Yeah, so the Dead played there. Lots of people played there. I ended up starting out doing what they call backstage security, which means I stood along a fence. Right. I wasn't even in the front of the stage. I was on the side.
Right.
Pretty nondescript job. But the responsibility was that you had to stay where you're supposed to be and be responsible and keep people who were not supposed to be in areas away from the areas they weren't supposed to be in. It was a little bit of overkill in terms of security. It could have been done with a few less people, and I think over years they got it more fine-tuned. But that's where I started. And after about 4 or 5 shows, John gets a call from Santana's tour manager, saying that they need this is the days before they had what they call runners. They needed somebody local who knew the area, who knew how to drive, and could be an assistant for a couple of days while they were in New York doing the show and recording.
Right.
They pulled me off the line and sent me in to do it, asked me if I wanted to do it. And I went and did it and spent like 5 days in a recording studio with Santana. It was like one of the great moments in my life at that time. And managed to negotiate, learned some good tricks in negotiation, or good experience in negotiating how to get paid, and got myself reasonably taken care of, and showed up back at the show with the band. Now I'm working for the band. I got a band pass. I'm not just an employee. And from there I sort of started getting promoted into more important security positions, more areas of responsibility. Then I went back to school and came back the next year, had graduated. John had hired me to road manage, which is what I really wanted to do, a band that he was trying to get a record deal for, and I became a stagehand for him at the Capitol Theater with sort of a crew of 6 guys, most of which have all gone on to real success in this business, have been production managers for people like Van Halen, building managers, the tour director for Lady Gaga was the stage manager. And I sort of came up with the right group of guys at the right time. We were the second generation of guys.
What was the band that he was trying to get the deal for?
A band called Stanky Brown Group.
Yeah, I've seen those out. I've seen a couple of those albums out.
Yeah, we made 3 records, toured all over America. Not a tremendous amount of success, but it was a great experience.
Was the
sort of like I learned on the job.
It sounds to me like the amount of experiential learning that you had, I mean, compared to today when everything's kind of taught in a classroom and then you go out and there was just so much real on-the-ground learning opportunities for you. I also wonder, like, okay, so you, this going back to 1970 with the Allmans, this show, did you keep all the soundboard tapes of those shows, like the Chicago show? Is that stuff?
No, the bands kept those tapes. Yeah, you didn't get those. Occasionally, people would try. Back in those days, there's a guy who used to show up in a Volkswagen van and just start to set, because the sound equipment usually was owned by a local guy, not by the bands.
Right.
And the sound guys, these guys would show up and start clipping microphones onto the other microphones and like making tapes. And the bands, every once in a while, the bands would figure it out and like lose their minds, and get the tape from the guy, or the guy would make some kind of deal with them. The tape from American University was really a band recorded tape, because bands this is the days before cassettes.
Right.
The bands were recording on reel-to-reel tape recorders. Tape was expensive, and not a lot of people had reel-to-reel recorders. So they'd get the tape and they'd go listen to it like the next day, hear what it sounded like, and then it would sort of like either get re-recorded over or put aside. That's what happened with American University, is it got put aside. Turned up in somebody's closet years later.
After that show with did you feel like, after that show with the Allmans, when did you really, you must have run into them on the road periodically? When was
I was a bit, now this is the second time I saw them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They were even more explosive when I saw them in American. They were next playing at the Fillmore in March 1971. Turns out to be the Fillmore East album. I bought tickets at the Fillmore to go see them. They played in Capitol Theater in Portchester, I want to say maybe in January before that. I can't remember when, had the chronology of that. I'd have to go look it up. But I saw them play at Capitol Theater in Portchester. That's probably after the Fillmore closed. I saw them play in Central Park. I saw through the local promoter I got involved with in D.C. They did a show in Richmond with the band, which I worked, and saw them there. By the time I was done, I saw him 13 times before Dwayne died.
I was going to ask you about that. First of all, it's so cool that you and Dwayne had some. Those chicken sandwiches at Roy Rogers were killer, by the way. It's so great that you had a chance to hang with him. I really wanted to ask you about Dwayne because, you read all this stuff about Dickie and Greg and all this, and it's like, boy, if Dwayne was around, I wonder if any of that stuff even would have materialized,
Well, Dwayne's clearly the leader. There's two books out recently. The one to really read is Dwayne's daughter Galadriel's book. Galadriel was Dwayne's only daughter, who was about 2.5 years old when her father died, and she is a very bright woman who's really set out on a journey to learn who her father was from those people who really knew him.
Mm-hmm.
And she spent a lot of time interviewing and talking to the people that grew up with him, his childhood friends, the few that actually exist, her family members, band members, and the like, who were sort of all there, musicians that all played with him early on. And she put together a pretty interesting, fairly accurate portrait of who her father was. And I think you really get what a powerful leader he was, and how things sort of worked. A guy named Alan Paul, who's a writer for Guitar World, has also written a book called One Way Out, which is really an oral history. And he did a very good job, I think, of talking to people, capturing the story, and then he'd ask 9 people to tell him the same story. And then he'd try and piece together what was probably the most accurate composite of that story.
Wow. Interesting. Very interesting.
I've only seen 2 or 3 mistakes that I know of in the book that were just things that he didn't ask everybody to get it totally clear, or didn't ask the right questions. Alan was pretty protective in terms of letting people read what he was writing prior to publishing it. And there's just things are just where it didn't quite get the full clarity of a one specific event that I can think of. But he didn't quite ask the question the right way.
Well, here's the thing. Part of one of my L's is leadership. Could you talk about a couple of unorthodox leadership styles about Dwayne that he had that were really strong?
Again, I wasn't there for this stuff, but I know what I've heard from people.
Yeah.
Who are the people who were there?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the band members? And they tell me that Dwayne sort of led by example. Also, didn't ask anyone to do anything he wasn't willing to do. But he also had the ability to sort of poke fun at stuff and try and take the tension out of it. And really, he always wanted everyone to feel like it was a band. He didn't tell people what to do, but he was clearly the Messiah figure who really led. He had the charisma, he had the belief, and he had the talent. And and everybody else sort of followed him. I mean, the big thing is the dynamic between he and his brother Greg. I mean, Greg talks about it in his book.
Yeah.
He was the father figure, in their family. Or the father had been murdered when they were toddlers. The mother really struggled to bring them up right, and he was really he was the go-getter. He was the troublemaker. Greg was sort of followed along.
When you would, segueing back into Scatico, when you in the 70s, did you find your way back there at any point? I mean, and even at just for a visiting day, or did did your kids go there? Did you? What was your?
Yeah, I came back for when they first started doing these reunions.
Yeah.
I went back for one, and I'm just trying to think when it was. I'm thinking. I want to say it could be it's already. It had to be like 1981, 82.
Okay.
I had come back, and just for an afternoon event, and it was really fun to see the camp and see some old friends, and it was pretty interesting. But I was sort of like on the older edge of those people that were there. It tended to be a lot campers or people or post campers who were a lot younger.
You right.
Jake, what years were you there?
I went to Scatico starting in '87, and I went every year through 2001, with one year exception when Dave told me that I needed to take some time off and sort of get my counselor chops together. but yeah, 14 summers as a camper and counselor.
Yeah, you're there a long time.
Well, I mean, really, I actually am one of the greatest things of moving to Tucson is that I totally detoxed from camp, because it was really the only thing going on in my life during the winters. I was out taking the Long Island Railroad to my friends' houses. I wasn't a real rah camp, green gray guy, but I'll tell you, it really helped me relate to older people and younger people, and you had to figure out how to deal with other people. Without camp, there's no way I'd be where I am today. So yeah, it was but it was different. And I think that to me is just the most fascinating thing, is just to hear you talk about, I also like the fact that there's not a lot of warm and fuzzy feeling for you there. And the fact that you were not, favored in any way. And, I find that you're in '69, were you on counselor staff or again as a waiter?
I was a waiter. I was head waiter.
Head waiter.
I found camp really emotionally challenging.
Yeah.
But it really helped make me a better person, because I had to deal with adversity is not the right word, but I had to deal with turmoil. I had to deal with acceptance. It just made me tougher. It gave me the drive. It gave me the drive to strive. It gave me the drive to succeed.
Right.
Not everything came easy for me. I find that I look back now at the kids that I grew up with, the kids where everything came really easy and were like the big stars in grammar school and junior high school, and even into high school, they burn out.
I think you nailed it. I know. No, listen. It's running into a little bit of headwind is good. Camp was not. I was not Mr. Popular. I wasn't the best athlete. But I know cats, not just Scatico cats, where everything was so easy that when they faced adversity, they didn't know how to deal with it. And I think that part of that resolve came from camp. You're throwing your laundry out there, and it might come back washed, and it might not. You don't know. And
camp. I played sports. From junior high school. I played football and I wrestled, and the team experience. I really learned. I was not the star. I was not the quarterback. I was not the guy catching the ball. I'm not the guy running the ball. I learned how to do my job and be successful with the team. I played on an undefeated high school football team. It was a great thrill. One of the guys I played with made it all the way to the fringes of the pros. Ended up being a high school baseball coach. As he said, I was on the taxi squad for the New York Giants.
Right. Well, I mean, listen. No, you were like a Bill Belichick disciple that one day taking all those people down in flag football, though.
It had, and playing one of the guys I played against ended up being it was a big high school star and ended up playing in college. Somebody they knew really well.
We're gonna.
And he looked at me and goes, "Yo, where'd you come from?"
I wanted to ask you this question. A buddy of mine from Scatico met you backstage, I think at one of the last shows, or maybe it was one of the last shows, and he mentioned that Jerry Jemmett and Bernard Pretty Purdy were there. Were those cats playing at the Fillmore with Aretha, or how did they connect with the Allmans?
Well, what happened was Dwayne did Aretha sessions.
That's
that
right.
Jerry and Bernard were on.
That's right. Wexler.
And that's what the case. And what happened was in 2009, on our 40th anniversary, we sat down as a band and started saying, we got to get like the coolest people to come play with us. And we started like throwing out names, and a lot of it had to do with Dwayne. It was really a celebration of Dwayne. And it started with Eric Clapton. And Derek Trucks had played with Eric Clapton, and we leaned on Derek to get a letter to him as an invitation where we asked him if he'd come play. And much to our surprise, he agreed. Wow. And we were hoping he'd say yes, but we knew it was a real long shot. And once he said yes, we started asking other people to play. Everyone, many of them said yes. Some people couldn't do it. We asked Jackson Brown. He couldn't do it. Bob Skaggs did do it. Guys from Marshall. We had some of the guys from Marshall Tucker. Some of the guys from Leonard Skinner. Kid Rock wanted to do it. We had him come do it. And then we started getting real obscure people. Guys like we had the whole idea of trying to get that whole Aretha band. We ended up bringing some of them in, not all of them in. They brought in. One of them said, I think Bernard said, the original keyboard player's like a cab driver in Queens, man. We ought to get him to come play, and we brought him in.
Was Cornell Dupree there, or the?
We talked about bringing Cornell in. Yeah. Cornell was not in good enough health.
Right. No, there was a. What about the Swampers? Did they go? Did they come up?
No, we talked to them about it. They all wanted to get paid. We said, look, guys, no one's getting paid. We'll pay your expenses.
Right.
No one's getting paid.
What is your
and those guys, it's like a different vibe. Those guys are studio guys. They're not live players. You got to be able to play live because you're going to play with us. You're going to sit in with us.
Do you know? I'm going to ask you this trivia question though. Do you know David Hood and Hawkins? Do you know their first?
I know of them. I don't really know them.
No, but do you know their first? You're right, because they were in the studios. But do you know what their first live gig was?
What, Traffic?
Good for you, New Haven. They were 20,000 people with Rebop, Quebop, that percussionist,
yep.
and Traffic, and they're out there playing live 17-minute jams. It was just phenomenal to me. They weren't traditional live players, but man.
But it's funny in that grouping. There's a guy who gets really overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Hinton, the guitar player.
Yeah.
Phenomenal guitar player.
Is he still around?
Nah, he's long gone. I walked into Derek Trucks' room one day, and Derek's playing music. And I said to him, man, that's great. Who's that? He goes, Eddie Hinton. I said, man, I heard the name, but I didn't know he was a guitar player.
Right.
Yeah, man. What happens is he sings like Otis Redding, and he plays like Dwayne Allman.
Yeah, no.
The guy was phenomenal. Had serious mental issues, I'm told, but the guy was phenomenal.
All right, so as we wrap up here, part one with Bert Holman, can you talk a little bit about some projects that you have in the hopper going on this year, and also plug a little bit about what your daughter's doing?
Actually, I'd love to talk about my daughter. But the project right now, I'm obviously working on. I'm working on some of the archival stuff for the Allman Brothers. Hopefully, we will finally get a remixed A&R Studios out. A&R Studios was a live radio broadcast that they had done for WPLJ in New York in 1971. We've managed to, after a laborious litigation, managed to get the tapes back in our possession, and we've remixed them. We hopefully will have them out in the next 3 months or so. Bootlegs have been out for years, but this remix version, blows the rest of that stuff away.
Mm-hmm.
And we're excited about that. We've put out some colored vinyl recently. We have some other archival live stuff that we'd like to put out, as well as we're talking about doing a DVD of all these guest artists that I was talking about from the 2009 Beacon series. We put out a live 40th anniversary DVD of just the band playing the first 2 records. But now we want to do a compilation of the guest artists. That's problematic in terms of getting clearances from everybody, but hopefully we'll get everyone to, or at least enough people to say yes, that will enable us to put the project out.
I mean, heck, if they came and did it, I'm sure they wouldn't. Well, who knows? I mean, I like the.
Well, hey, now we're in the business. The business is always something different. Playing live is one thing. We had streamed it on video through Butch Trucks' Project Mugus, which is a subscription service video that existed. And there are bootlegs out there, but we want to go back and re-edit it and remix the audio and make it as good as we can make it and put it out there.
Did your daughters go to Scatico?
My daughters did not go to Scatico.
You are just like
my wife.
Yeah, go ahead.
It was really from my I think my wife's point of view. My wife is an old school hippie in a sense,
mm-hmm.
and she's looking for much more progressive experience for the girls. Felt that Scatico might be a little too bourgeois for them.
Really? Oh yeah, I guess I can see that. Yeah.
So my older daughter went to a camp very similar to Scatico in Maine, but only for 4 weeks, because you could do that camp was a 4-week, had 2 4-week sessions, and then she ended up at a camp called Maine Teen Camp, which is a camp anybody who ever wanted to go to camp would want to go to camp. It's a camp for teenagers where you get to basically hang out and have a good time. She loved it. She had a great time there for 2 years. That daughter now lives in New York City and works in the public relations field. My younger daughter, who I'm just immensely proud of, is recently became a member of the DC Demon Cats, known as Ella Fitzgerald, which is her skating name.
Oh, yeah.
She skated in her first Demon Cats match in women's flat track roller derby.
Tell me why it makes you proud. I have 2 daughters.
Anybody's looking for a good thing to do on a weekend, go on the internet, find a women's flat track roller derby near you, and go see it. It is such a hoot, man. You think you saw roller derby on TV when you were young? You got to see this. This is just the coolest thing in the world. It's amateur. It is player-owned leagues. These people all do this for the love of the sport. They have a great time. It's a great cultural experience. It's a lot of fun, and it's not expensive.
This is the kind of progressive hippie stuff that your wife wanted your daughter to pursue, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, no, she played rugby in college, and she took a lot. I think she saw the movie Whip It, and it inspired is all I can tell her. I mean, I know you're down in Tucson. I didn't look. I'm sure there's a team in Tucson. There's a league in Tucson. I know there's a league in Phoenix. There's a big league in Denver, in L.A. that I know of. There's one in D.C. I mean, there's one everywhere. Pittsburgh's got one. Buffalo's got one. Boston. I've seen the teams up here in Boston play a number of times. The women skate under pseudonyms. A lot of them are really funny. The team names are all really creative. It's a lot. It's just a lot of fun. But skating's real. These girls mix it up.
And my engineer's showing me we absolutely the next event, Tucson Roller Derby. We absolutely have one down here. So this is phenomenal.
Go check it out. It's definitely worth it. Take the kids. Take your grandparents. It's a really good time. It's a real family event. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I'll tell you, Bert, I had a lot of fun too, man. I can't thank you enough for taking the time, and I'll get you a file of this as soon as I can, okay?
Cool, man. I appreciate it.
All right, talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jake. See you.
All right, see you.
Bye.
By the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you all next week.